Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Devy to Dynasty Film Room podcast. I'm your host, Matt Jackson. With me, no Matt Rupert tonight, but don't you guys worry, we got Matt Cooper joining us tonight. Cooper, man, how are you doing? How's your week been?
It's been pretty good, man. Overall, can't complain.
I'm really excited, man, to dive into tonight because there's one guy that we're about to discuss tonight that I'm all over, and I'm excited to dive into the film. Tonight, what we're going to be doing, guys, just for anybody that hasn't joined the show before, we're breaking down incoming rookies into the 2024 NFL draft. We've been doing that for several weeks now, and we're excited tonight as we're going to continue our Inside the Prospect series looking at the wide receiver position. And Cooper, I don't know about you, but I feel like we're going to have very different opinions on these two wide receivers. One of these guys I was personally really high on as a freshman, and I came away from the film just absolutely blown away about what I saw on film and what he was able to do and produce on the tape. And another one I was excited to watch. I didn't know much about, and I was excited to dive into the film, and I came away feeling at the best really iffy about. And of course, the two guys we're talking about tonight, that is Texas's Xavier Worthy and UNC's Devontae Walker. Well, who we're going to start with first is Xavier Worthy from Texas, a 6'1" 172-pound junior. He was a former four-star prospect, the number 13 wide receiver in his class. 247 comps him to Deshaun Jackson. And Cooper, I got to tell you, I like this comp a little bit, but you have a better one that we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes that I think really fits who Xavier Worthy is to a T. And I'm excited to dive into the film of Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you and I are going to have different takes in terms of us disagreeing, but it might be different than what the consensus is saying everywhere else. And I'll just say this as we get into it. If you're new listening to the show and you haven't been following the Inside the Prospect series, go check out the other ones. We've been covering two prospects every week. And I'll just catch you up a little bit on what our process is. So each of us scouts 2 full games of all 22, every snap that the guy's on the field, so that we're seeing strengths and weaknesses. We're not just watching highlights out here. And all 22, that's the zoomed out view where you can see all 22 players on the field at the same time. So we kind of go trait by trait through this thing and look at what we think is really good and going to translate to the NFL, what maybe concerns us. And so, yeah, that's what we've been doing for a while now, and we'll continue to do all the way up through the draft in April. So, yeah, excited to get into these prospects.
Yeah, for sure. That was a great thing to add. And one of the things that we scout when we're scouting the wide receiver position, and we always look at this first, is their route running. How do they do versus press? How do they look at the stem of the route? What does their release look like? And then how do they do versus zone coverage? And man, when I watch Xavier Worthy's film, Cooper, you always know that he's a speed guy, right? He's a guy that's going to take the top off the defense. He's going to be a monster yards after the catch guy. But I really came away impressed with him as a route runner. His release, the way he utilizes a jab step, he cuts inside. He really gets really good inside leverage. I mean, he just sets up defenders really well with his release package. And when he comes to his route running, man, he sinks his hips really well. He explodes through his routes. I mean, he's a really smooth and polished route runner. What did you think when it came to his route running?
Yeah, I'm totally with you, man. I mean, he has that reputation as just being a speed demon, and he is really, really fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was blown away by him as a route runner, and I kind of had a feeling because I'm a Devy guy, so I've been watching him for years, and I've seen flashes here and there of really good route running, but it was beyond my expectations. I'll say that. I mean, whatever I had heard about him going in, he struggles with physicality. I saw him fight through physicality, win hand fights, keep battling through a guy on his hip all the way down the field to make tough plays. I saw him dominate against press coverage, which normally you see an undersized guy, 172 pounds. You think, well, press coverage is going to bother him. He's just going to get jammed up. But he just dusted guys right off the line. His footwork, his release package to just give jab steps and other, hesitation steps, just give him a little shimmy shake, and then boom, if he wanted to get inside, he got inside. If he wanted to get outside, he got outside. He was winning leverage. He was stacking guys on his back. He was manipulating defense at the stem of the route, give the little head nod to the inside, and then boom, he's outside. His hip sync was incredible. I mean, just the way that Xavier Worthy sunk his hips and stopped on a dime for a guy that was moving as fast as he would, and then he could just stop. And so open, just so much separation on those comeback routes and those stop routes. I mean, he was winning in a lot of different ways. He was always open. It was really fun to watch. I did not know that he was that much of a technician, but he's so twitchy and he has
Yeah.
that elite burst and speed, and he just uses all that to get the defender on his heels. And then all of a sudden he's going the other way and he's wide open. And it was all over. I mean, I felt like I was pausing every play to make a note about a great route that he had just run.
Yeah. I mean, I paused. I've got written on my sheet about 7 or 8 times in one game that I paused the film and made a note just on his twitchiness, the way he explodes through his brakes, the way that he, like you said, just sinks his hips and stops on a dime after going full speed. I mean,
Mhm.
and I felt like I could have taken more notes. Like I was like, I've got to stop. I've got to move on. Or this 10-minute game film was going to take me 45 minutes to watch. Like it was something that was really impressive for him. And for somebody for his size, I mean, 172 pounds, you would expect him to get knocked off his routes a lot. He just didn't do this. He was creating separation. And I mean, looking at his stats, I mean, he only had 1,014 receiving yards this season. There were several plays that I thought if Quinn Ewers could have just hit this man while he was open, he could have easily had 13 or 1,400 receiving yards this season.
Yeah, one of the games that I scouted it was when Quinn Ewers was hurt and Malik Murphy was in there, and he was he was so bad. I'm sorry, Malik Murphy, but he was terrible. It was like I don't know how many times I wrote down like, oh, he was wide open but not targeted, or uh, he was wide open but the pass was nowhere close. So yeah, I mean, we already did a film breakdown on Adonai Mitchell a couple weeks ago, who's a really good receiver in his own right, going to get drafted probably at least day 2. So, and Jatavian Sanders, we just did last week. He's one of the top 2 tight ends in the class. So there was 1,000 yards that needs context, right? Like with that many weapons on the team to spread the ball around to, and he still has 1,000 yards. And he's been doing it, by the way, since he was a true freshman. He had 981 yards and 12 touchdowns as a true freshman. So the guy's been dominating since the moment he stepped foot on a college field. And yeah, I did not expect to come away from watching this film as high on him as I am now.
Oh no, me either. But with the good comes the bad, right? And we got to talk
Right.
about the bad here a little bit. And I want to get to his ball skills, his hands, his body control, and first and foremost his hands, right? I mean, that's the thing we got to talk about. There were several times watching film, and I had to reach out to you to see how many times you saw it, and you saw it a lot too. That he just dropped wide open passes. Passes that he should have brought in. I noticed several times when he was catching passes, he was still catching it with his body, right? He wasn't extending one of the ball. He was a little bit of a body catcher in some instances, but his drops are going to be an issue. I mean, is that going to be something that really plagues him at the next level and possibly even keeps him off the field?
Yeah, I mean, he had a drop rate of over 10% um, in 2022. This was like his sophomore season after the true freshman breakout. So he had a sophomore dip, and he only had 760 yards and 9 touchdowns as a sophomore. That's still better than some guys' best season in college. But that was his sophomore slump, and a lot of it had to do with that over 10% drop rate. Now in 2021, as a true freshman, he only had a 4.6% drop rate, and then it actually went back down again this year. So he did clean it up a little bit, which was
Yeah, that's what I was
encouraging.
about to say. I felt like he cleaned it up a little bit this season,
He
but
did clean it up a
it's
little
still on
bit.
his tape, right? It's still there.
It's still there, and it's something that he's going to have to continue to work on. And I will say, the more that you're targeted, the more that you're going to drop the ball. If you go look at a list of the drop leaders in the NFL, in fact, I'll look it up right now. NFL drop leaders, and I click on the link. Number 1, Puka Nakua. Number 2, Tyreek Hill. Right, so
Yeah.
like
Guys that are
you can
getting
get a
volume.
picture here that the higher the volume, like drops are just part of the game of football. Everybody drops it sometimes. And so this isn't something that's going to keep him off my board, but I do wish that it wasn't as much of an issue. And he's never going to be a big contested catch guy anyway at 172 pounds. Like ball skills is not where he makes his living. This is
But I
not
don't
going
think
to be
he
a
has
guy
to,
that's going
right?
to go up and catch a bunch of 50-50 balls.
But he doesn't have to because he's getting so open at the stem of his route.
Exactly. So, I mean, he's much more in the vein of like Tank Dell last year. Some other guys, that's not my favorite comp. I'm going to give you some comps in a minute, but Really, I think with Xavier Worthy, I did see some really nice catches where he went up and high pointed it and plucked it with his hands. That shows that he can do it. I think when he does have those drops, they're more of concentration drops. It's like an easy throw and it just goes, he's trying to run after the catch before he's actually secured the catch, I think is what's happening most of the time. He actually tracks the ball really well down the field. So when he's running deep and the deep pass can sometimes veer left or right, he veers with it. He tracks it well, gets right underneath that thing. So there are some positives about his ball skills, but there's definitely some drops in there. And that's clearly the biggest issue on his tape. But that's something that overall I can live with. I can
Yeah.
live with some drops. Can it get you in trouble? Can it get you in the coach's doghouse? Of course it can. But we also understand that it's fixable. And as long as you're on the field getting that volume, your team can live with drops every now and then. Ted Ginn is a guy that was super, super fast, got open deep down the field a ton. And every once in a while, he definitely made you frustrated dropping a wide open, what would have been a touchdown. But he was also incredibly productive too for a lot of years in the NFL. So yeah, ball skills, it's a
I
concern,
love
but it's
the
not a deal breaker for me.
I love the Carolina Panthers guy that you had to bring in there too at the end.
He
I
did have his
personally
best
appreciate
years as
that.
a Carolina Panther.
So, but something I do want to talk about is his physicality, right? That goes hand in hand with his size, his athleticism traits, and we're going to talk about in a second. But his physicality, you've already talked about it. He fights through hand fighting really well. But there was one play specifically. It was around the 5 minute mark in the Oklahoma film that I was watching on Dynasty Nerds Film Room. If you guys aren't subscribed, that's where we're getting all of our film from. Is from the Dynasty Nerds Film Room. You can use code COOP to get 35% off on that. So make sure you guys are doing that. That's where
15%
we're
off.
or 15% off, not 35.
15% off.
That'd be
That'd be
crazy.
pretty good if we could give you
Yeah,
35% off. I'd love that.
15% off. So make sure you
But
guys are
15% off Coop, COOP. The link will be in the description. Definitely
yeah,
check it out. It helps support us on the channel, and
yeah.
it's a great place to go study these guys for yourself.
So his physicality, though, there was, in that Oklahoma film, there was one play where he caught the ball on the sidelines and he's running for the end zone, right? And he just absolutely levels a safety that's coming down to tackle him, like levels him, stands over him, and walks into the end zone. So, like at 172 pounds, you wouldn't expect a guy to do that, but he plays bigger than his size, and
Mhm.
that's what I want to talk about: his physicality. He plays strong, so that's what you like to see. The guys that are undersized, that
Mhm.
you're worried a little bit about injury. I'm not worried about that when it comes to Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, and it was a knock on him. This was another thing that, like, sophomore year was that slump, and one of the knocks was he's not physical. He can get taken out of a play by physicality. So it's amazing to me. Like, I love to see that he comes out gangbusters, true freshman season. Everybody's all over him. He's a super high pick in Devy drafts. Sophomore year, he has a little bit of a slump. There's some issues, some traits that come out that we don't like. But to come back junior year and to have really clearly visibly improved in some of those areas is great to see him, and it shows his work ethic. And yeah, I saw a much improved player this year in terms of dealing with physicality.
Yeah, for sure. Well, another thing that he was really good at. Now, we're not going to stick too well on the lows, his hands for right now. We're going to go back to something that he was incredible at, and this is yards after the catch, right? His speed, the way he gets down the field, he takes the top off of defense, and the way he catches the ball, he has got a plan in mind, and he can run in the open space and almost look like a running back with the ball in his hand on the way to a long touchdown pass. Like I said earlier, his comp was Deshaun Jackson, right? And as an Eagles guy, I see that all over the film when it comes to Xavier Worthy. This dude has got speed for days. He's going to dust you on the line. He's going to create separation, and then he's going to house a long touchdown catch. I mean, that's who this guy is, and I love that part of his game. What about you?
Yeah, Xavier Worthy is, in my opinion, either the best or second best yards after catch guy in the entire draft class. It's either him or Malik Neighbors. Out of all the guys I've studied so far, I mean, he was elusive. He was making guys miss. So twitchy. That same twitchiness that you see out of him as a route runner, you saw it juking defenders out of their shoes. And the acceleration is just insane. Like, he goes 0 to 60 so fast.
In a
So if you
hurry.
give him even the slightest little window, I mean, he would catch it and then just defeat angles. And he gets to the outside, and you think, how did he just get to the outside and 10 yards up the field that quickly? It's like you blink an eye. So, I mean, he is really, really good after the catch. I was very impressed in this area.
Yeah, for sure. Speed, he has it for days. He's a little undersized, but like we said already, he plays well for his size. I mean, there's a lot to like about Xavier Worthy. He runs solid routes. He's dust guys off the line of scrimmage, and he can house a ball anytime he catches it. So I mean, there's a lot to like about his film. When it comes to his intangibles, his football IQ, his run blocking, anything that's going to make a coach fall in love with you and keep you on the film. What did you feel? What did you see when it came to Xavier Worthy when it came to these areas?
I will say that run blocking was a struggle that I noted on tape, and some of that I think is just a strength issue. Like he could just get pushed out of the way pretty easily. And I felt like he was a willing blocker. He was willing to stick his nose in there. He just wasn't able to hold the blocks for very long.
No.
So, in terms of the size thing, I mean, obviously, let me just address that real quick. We have seen a ton of smaller receivers come into the league the last few years and be really successful. So I'm not overly worried about it. I mean, we'll see how he comes in with at the actual combine. These are school listed height and weight that we have at this point. 6'1", 172. He might be shorter than that. He might be heavier than that. He might be lighter than that. I don't know. But I will say, I mean, from what we saw at Tank Dell last year, Devontae Smith has been dominating in the league. I mean, Josh Downs was a guy I really liked this past year. That was a smaller guy, and he had a pretty good rookie season. So there's a lot of these guys that are a little bit on the smaller side, specifically on the skinnier side. Jordan Addison is another one that are really, really succeeding right now in the NFL. So this doesn't bother me too much. It's kind of a style makes the fight, right? So you've got your alpha X, go up and get the 50-50 balls type of guy, and he's not that.
And
But
let's be real. Your Alpha X 6'3", 220-pound receivers. Those guys aren't dominating the league anymore. They're not the
yeah, they're kind of
prototype
going a little
anymore.
out of style, especially for fantasy. I mean, with PPR, the guys that get open and earn a lot of targets and get a lot of volume are scoring you a lot more consistent fantasy points than the guys who need a long touchdown. And so, yeah, Xavier Worthy, my comp for him, we've kind of been teasing it. I said he runs routes like Deontay Johnson, but with Jamison Williams juice, which that's a pretty dangerous combo. And ironically, both of those guys have issues with drops, right?
Yeah.
So Deontay Johnson route running with some Jamison Williams juice. That's my comp for Xavier Worthy. And I'm really excited to get this guy. I mean, I'll just be honest with you too. The second round ADP that he has in rookie drafts right now is an absolute steal. Like I'm going to draft
I
him
was
in.
just going to mention that I haven't seen a rookie draft so far that's super flex where I've seen him go mocked in the first round right now. I mean, Dynasty Nerds just put out a rookie mock a couple days ago, and they had Braylon Allen going above Xavier Worthy. And I think if you can
You know
get
how we
Xavier
feel about
Worthy
that
in the
one.
second, I mean, you are stealing candy from babies.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like, let's just real quick talk about the receivers that we've scouted so far. I mean, we've talked about Marvin Harrison Jr., we've talked about Malik Neighbors, talked about Troy Franklin, Romo Dunze. That's probably my top four of the guys that we have looked at so far. And I would put Xavier Worthy right in a tier with Odunze and Troy Franklin. Not that far behind those. I mean, strong argument to put him as high as wide receiver 3, based on my film evaluation. And he's expected to get really good draft capital too. But he's going way lower than those guys. So I think of all the wide receivers we've scouted so far, he's the best value pick. And I just love the guy. So I have him ahead of Adonai Mitchell, who we scouted. I've got him very clearly ahead of Keon Coleman, who we scouted. And Keon Coleman has a higher ADP than Worthy right now. I would take Worthy all day long. And then we're going to talk about one more guy here in a minute. But
Yeah.
we're clearly we both are going to end up being above consensus, I think, on Xavier
Yeah.
Worthy.
And I was going to say, I would put him as high as wide receiver 3. I mean, that's kind of where I had him after watching this film. And I mean, if you're looking at a championship team, right, you've got the 112 in your rookie draft. I texted you a couple of days ago, if I could come away with one of either Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., or Xavier Worthy, I'm doing laps around my house. Like if I can get Xavier Worthy at the 112, that is an excellent piece to add to a championship roster.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel great about that pick too. So let's move on. Let's talk about the other guy on our board here.
Yep, and that guy, of course, is UNC's Devontae Walker. And he was a guy, 6'1", 197 pounds. And that those are confirmed measurements. He's at the Senior Bowl. So those are confirmed measurements on him. Former 3-star prospect. He was not rated as a wide receiver coming into his class. Started at Kent State before transferring to UNC. Didn't get immediate eligibility. Had to wait on his waiver for a little bit, but he did end up getting it that granted and playing 8 games this year. So he finished this season. After 8 games. So let's talk about his film, what we saw in film. And the first thing that I want to talk about is his route running. When you look at his route running, his release versus press, how he does at the stem of his route. I was watching him on film, and he was a guy, like I said earlier, I was excited to watch on film, but I came away feeling a little iffy, gross almost about, especially at his route running. When I watched his release versus press, he was very slow at his release point. He didn't explode off the line like Xavier Worthy does, right? And I think part of that is because I just got finished watching Xavier Worthy. So I was expecting to see some of that. And this guy just kind of is very lackadaisical off the line, doesn't have a lot of in the release package. I wrote down on my notes, and I feel like he does a lot to get very little result. He has a lot of movement, and he doesn't really get a lot out of it. His stem of the routes, he rounds off his routes a lot. He slows down significantly when cutting, and just doesn't look like a solid route runner. I texted you earlier, and I told you if I see this guy run one more comeback route, I'm going to lose it, because that feels like that's all Tez Walker was doing was running comeback routes. He doesn't have a very defined route running package. So he's a guy when it comes to route running. Tez Walker is not a great route runner in my eyes, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I actually watched Tez Walker before I watched Xavier Worthy. So I didn't have that same, like you said, you watched Xavier Worthy and then watched him afterwards. And that's a little unfair because Xavier Worthy is like the fastest guy in the draft class. I actually watched Tez Walker first, but I made a lot of the same observations, man. He was fast. I saw him dusting a lot of guys just in a straight line down the field. And I saw him find the soft spot in the zone a decent amount. And that's about where the positives ended for me. And again, this was a guy that I was excited to watch. I mean, he had a very productive season when he was on the field at UNC. He was Drake May's top target. He had dominated at Kent State before transferring in, and then to see him do it at a Power 5 level, like I expected to like this guy. And the technique is just not there. I mean, like you said, very slow in and out of his breaks. Like it took him multiple steps to make a cut. So he's basically a straight line north-south guy. He did not sink his hips well, so he ran a lot of those comeback routes to try to play off of his vertical. So his best route was just a straight go route, just running a straight line, beat your guy with speed. And then his kind of counter to that was the comeback route, where he'd threaten deep and then try to stop on a dime and get open on a comeback. Problem was he didn't stop on a dime. It took him multiple steps to throttle down. He wasn't getting that separation. He wasn't very effective at running that route. And so, I mean, the route tree was very limited. Probably 80% of what I saw him run was either vertical routes or comebacks. I did notice a bunch of rounded routes, like you said, just so many issues with his technique. And honestly, it was just disappointing. Like I just didn't feel like he was hardly ever open, and he'd get a couple of big plays every game, but he just wasn't consistently doing it. So
the plays that I did see him get open were the go routes that you were just talking about, because he has decent speed, right? He's not blowing anybody out of the water, but he's not once he gets going, he's not slow. So he can get some good catches on the vertical routes. And that was some of the film that I was watching, that some of his multi-touchdown games came on big pass plays like that. So he's got the speed to do that, but he's not, like you said, a nuanced route runner.
From a fantasy perspective, though, if you're a go route specialist, I mean, that's okay, I guess, in best ball, but you can't count on it. And I mean, those are routes that even if you're getting open, the protection has to hold up. The quarterback has to actually be able to step in and make the throw that far down the field. He's got to hit it accurately. It's a lower percentage throw. And so
if you're even being utilized
consistently on a deep route, you're not going to get targeted every time. And it's a low percentage thing. So if that's your bread and butter, you really need to have some other weapons in your arsenal. And at this point, I don't think Tez Walker has that.
Yeah. And that's even if you're being utilized for that, because a lot of these guys that are just speed guys, what are they used for in the NFL? Where they're used to run the clear out routes so somebody can work over the middle of the field out to the boundaries.
Yeah, get somebody else open. You're the
You're
decoy.
not getting the ball.
Yeah, for sure.
So
So, yeah, I mean, moving on, let's talk about ball skills. What did you see with his ball skills?
yeah, I was about 50-50 with his ball skills because I did see some really good contested catches on his film. I saw some ability to really go up and high point the ball well, contort his body and kind of adjust to poorly thrown balls. And Drake May had a few of those this season. He would get down low, he would go up high and catch some poorly thrown balls. So I did see some really good body control and occasionally some contested catches. But when it comes to his physicality, one of the things that I really notice is Tez Walker gets pushed off of his spot a lot. He gets bullied en route and gets knocked off of his route more often than he does not. His hands, I mean, I was watching the tape against Duke, and his Duke tape is just littered with drops. He had about 4 or 5 drops in that game. It was crazy. So he's got some good with the bat. He does some things very well, but he also does some things that are poor. So I was 50-50 on him. What do you think?
Yeah, I was a little bit 50-50 on that as well, honestly. Like I saw some good catches. I saw him mostly catching with his hands. I did see a few kind of basket catches, but overall, I wouldn't have called it a concern. I actually didn't see really any contested catch situations. I noted maybe 2 or 3 in the couple games that I watched.
Go back and watch the Campbell film.
Okay,
He's got a few in that one.
yeah, I'll definitely take a look. But the ones that I watched, there were like 3 contested catch situations, and all 3 were like uncatchable balls. So it's just, you can't really draw any conclusions from that. I will say that he is not a great. I mean, he's. I just didn't see enough of it to say that he's a great contested catch guy.
Yeah.
But he's got the body for it. I mean, 6'1", 197 pounds is good frame. And, I didn't see any major glaring technique issues. So in this, I'll give him a solid passing grade, but I didn't see any Keon Coleman was mossing guys left and right. Marvin Harrison Jr. was mossing guys left and right. I didn't see that out of Tez Walker. So he's not like this dominant ball skill beast, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah. And moving on, that's kind of how I feel about his yards after the catch, right? Just another area in his film. I feel like he got a passing grade. He does really well at his speed down the field, but I didn't see him getting enough separation to have the ability to get yards after the catch, right? A lot of times he would catch the ball and he would have a defender right on his hip pocket, and they would just instantly make the tackle. So this is an area that I saw some good speed to him. I saw some ability to kind of take the top off the defense a little bit, but I didn't see any yards after the catch in this film that made me go, yeah, this is what this guy could specialize in.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a few like jet sweeps where they gave him an end around, and because of his speed, he certainly was dangerous. I didn't see a lot of elusiveness, and I didn't feel like the vision was all that great. But just straight line, you block it for him. He had to get up and go. I will say just a little bit of analytics. We're more on the film side of things, but since 2018, this is per my friend Dynasty Zoltan. Since 2018, round 1 and 2 wide receiver draft picks have averaged 6.64 yards after the catch per reception. And the 14 wide receivers below 5.5 yards after catch per reception have combined for 1 top 12 fantasy season, which is not great. So where does Devontae Walker fall on this spectrum? 4.1 yards after catch per reception, well below that average and well below kind of that cutoff point where it limits your upside. So, I mean, top 12 that's high air. So it's not saying that he can't be a hit at all, that he can't be a top 24, whatever. It just limits the upside if he's not a great yak guy. And at least based on his college metrics, it would seem to indicate that it's not a strength for him. In fact, the metric would indicate that it's a weakness. I felt like it was just okay from my tape study. So just to give a little bit of data to back up what we're seeing on tape here. It was an okay area. It wasn't as much of a strength as you might hope for it to be.
Yeah, and that data is super helpful too because it's great to watch the film. I don't buy the argument that you have to be a film guy or you have to be an analytics guy. I feel like you have to do
Absolutely.
both.
Use them
You got to
together
be able to incorporate both.
for sure.
Moving on, and we kind of talked about this a little bit. His athleticism. What did you see when it came to that area? His size, his ability to move well without the ball, his ability to play up to his size. Was he able to do this?
So we kind of have hit on this as we've
Yeah,
talked about the other traits. I think he's very fast for his size, being 6'1", 197 in terms of straight line speed. What he really struggled with, and I don't know if this is more of a technique issue that can be coached or if it's a physical limitation, but the lateral agility, the wiggle, the stopping on a dime, making explosive, snappy breaks, like he just didn't look twitchy. He didn't have great movement skills.
yeah,
He's fast, but he didn't have great movement skills from what I could see studying the tape.
yeah, for sure. And I kind of agree with that as well. Last thing we're going to talk about when it comes to Tez Walker is his intangibles, right? What's a coach going to like that you're not going to get fantasy points for, but it's going to keep you on the football field? His run blocking, his ability to play with a high football IQ. When I watched him as a run blocker, he looked decent as a run blocker. He could utilize his size well, and he could make the blocks that you needed him to make. I did notice some plays where it felt like he was taking plays off, right? If he knew he wasn't the immediate receiver, he was kind of walking in his routes. He wasn't trying to get up the field to sell a go route or to sell a comeback route. He was kind of very lackadaisical with it. So that's an area of concern for me. Effort level, right? Coaches want you to have a high effort level. And I'm not saying Tez Walker doesn't have this, but it is something that I did notice on his tape. Did you notice anything?
Yeah, I don't know if I noticed like taking plays off, but it would be as as many go routes as they asked him to run. It would be understandable if he got a little winded from time to time. Like, I'm just running sprints out here. They don't ask me to run anything short or close to the line of scrimmage. So, um, yeah, I run blocking was fine, like you said. I didn't really see any issues there. And in terms of IQ, I thought his IQ was pretty good. Like, he was way better against zone than he was against man. He was
Yeah, for
not
sure.
separating at all against man coverage,
But he knows how to
but
sit down in his zone.
I saw a ton of his production coming from sitting down in the soft spot in the zone, throttling down in the right area to give his quarterback a target. And so, yeah, I think beating zone has more to do with football IQ than it has to do with physical ability. And so that tells me he's got pretty good football IQ that he was consistently beating the zone defense. So I think like when you see Harmon's stuff come out, I would be willing to bet that you're going to see his success rate on Matt Harmon's RP data come out pretty bad against man coverage and pretty decent, pretty respectable against zone coverage. So that was one thing that I noted.
Yeah. And just because we didn't hit on it, I feel like it needs to at least be said on the podcast. Senior Bowl is this week, and it's already coming out in Senior Bowl that he's not doing well in the one-on-one routes, the routes where he's pressed and he's manned up. So
Getting
that is
locked in.
important to note. If you're not doing well in the Senior Bowl, that doesn't bode well for your draft stock or what you're going to do at the next level.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, sometimes we get ahead of this stuff, right? Like when we said that we were out on Braylon Allen, everybody else was in on Braylon Allen, but now it looks like consensus because every time I do a mock draft, Braylon Allen's going like late second round. His ADP has plummeted because other people that had him really high just based off of name brand recognition have now started to study the tape and they've seen a lot of the same things that we have and they're starting to catch up. Consensus is catching up. And the same thing could happen with Tez Walker. We're still really early in the process. It's January. Like you said, Senior Bowl's this week. We haven't had the combine yet. Draft's not till April, so we got months before the draft. So right now, as of this recording, Tez Walker is a second-round rookie pick. And whereas I said Xavier Worthy is a steal in the second round, I would say Tez Walker is somebody that if his ADP doesn't drop, if he doesn't end up being a later pick, I'm gonna like there's no shot I'm drafting him in the second round. He's off my board if he's got a second round ADP based on what I saw studying the tape. So I think Xavier Worthy is one of the more underrated prospects that we've studied. And Tez Walker at this point in the process is probably one of the more overrated prospects that we've studied.
So speak to it a little bit. I mean, we've graded several wide receivers up until this point: Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell, and then Tez Walker. I mean, where do you put Walker up against all these other guys that we've graded?
He's dead last. He's dead last, and it's not particularly close, to be honest. Like, I think the next guy behind him would be Adonai Mitchell, and I would consider taking Adonai Mitchell with a second round rookie pick for sure. I mean, I think there's flaws there, but there's also some really big pros in his game. I would much rather have Adonai Mitchell than Devontae Walker. So out of the guys we've studied, Tez Walker is by far my last ranked guy.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, if you haven't caught up on our breakdowns on any of these other guys, they are all on Apple Podcast and on the YouTube channel as well. So make sure you guys catch up and get those analysis early before the tides start shifting, as Cooper just talked about. You can find out, watch the film for yourself, and find out earlier than most other guys in your draft. So make sure you guys are catching up on that. But that about does us for tonight. Cooper, you want to tell the people where they can find you on Twitter, and if they are listening on Apple Podcasts, where can they find this wonderful YouTube page?
Yeah, so twitter.com/@Devy2DynastyFR. That's the number 2, not TO, because it's the character limit. So Devy2DynastyFR, and the YouTube handle is the same, youtube.com/@Devy2DynastyFR. So if you are listening on Apple Podcast and you'd prefer seeing us on video, see our ugly mugs, come check us out on YouTube. We're also really hoping to get some film breakdowns coming for you guys where we can show you what we see instead of just telling you what we see. And in the works, we're trying to get a system going where we can cut up these podcasts into shorter video snippets. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, of watching kind of a 1-minute clip from this, those are going to be coming on the YouTube channel as well sometime soon.
Yep. You guys can find me on Twitter @DevyMatt. Love to always interact with you guys. If you've got any questions for the show, make sure you reach out and tweet us those questions, post, comment. If you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure you subscribe to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. Those help people hear our show and find out about what we're about. Next week, we're going to take a little bit of a break from the Inside the Prospect series, as it is the Senior Bowl week, and we've got lots of Senior Bowl content to break down. So make sure you guys are checking us out for that, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. But until then, peace out.